defense against cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, or in the case of this, slow-moving aerostats. We have a lot of work to do here. It's been assigned to the United States Air Force, but it unfortunately is going to be a very expensive endeavor because we've taken a bit of a busman's holiday for the last 30 years in developing those defenses.
Mark Montgomery with FDD. We appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, in other news, thousands of people are dead after a massive earthquake in southern Turkey and northern Syria early this morning. The overwhelming scale of devastation from the 7.8 magnitude earthquake captured in videos like this, a building collapsing as rescue workers search for survivors in the rubble of another building. As Chris Mitchell reports, the death toll, now at least 2,800, is expected to rise in the coming days.
Hundreds of buildings in the quake zone collapsed in cities across the border region like this one. And scenes like this showed the devastation that hit the area. After the quake, teams of rescue workers and residents rushed frantically to find those trapped in the rubble. And Turkey mobilized its rescue services.
A devastating earthquake. All our governors are on duty now. Security forces, Turkish armed forces, disaster and emergency management teams, Red Crescent teams, and search and rescue teams from many points of Turkey.
Turkey sits on top of major fault lines and is frequently shaken by earthquakes. The quake also smashed regions in northern Syria, areas controlled by forces fighting the Syrian government, and filled with 4 million people displaced by the country's civil war. Many of them live in poor conditions with little health care. Rescue workers said hospitals were filled, and the Syrian civil defense said Syria was in a state of catastrophe with entire neighborhoods leveled. More than 40 nations pledged help. At the request of Turkey, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said they would immediately provide medical and search and rescue teams, some of the best in the world. Israel's Magen search and rescue team will leave today to the quake region. The team uses specialized equipment and techniques to search for survivors. The epicenter was 20 miles from the Turkish city of Gaziantep and was felt as far away as central Israel and Cairo. At least 30 aftershocks continued to hit the region, with the strongest one measuring 7.5. Following the widespread devastation of the massive quake, search and rescue operations are likely to go on for many more days, followed by a tragic and long recovery. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. And back here at home, an immediate evacuation is underway for parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio at the scene of a burning, derailed freight train. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine warns that anyone in the evacuation zone is in grave danger of death as crews try a controlled release of hazardous chemicals. The train cars, 5 of which are carrying vinyl chloride, a chemical that could explode and hurl toxic fumes and shrapnel, derailed Friday in East Palestine, Ohio. The White House preparing for tomorrow night's State of the Union address. Coming up, how much of it will be a campaign kickoff for a re-election bid. Welcome back. Tomorrow night, the president will give his first State of the Union address since Republicans took control of the House. He's expected to make the case for a second term in office. Facing tough poll numbers this weekend, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was asked why Biden's accomplishments are not getting more credit from the public.
There have been so many accomplishments under this administration, it can be difficult to list them in a distilled way.
That's the thing, none of it seems to accrue to his benefit.
Well, people say that, but then, this president has exceeded expectations again and again.
And comments come as a record number of Americans say they are worse off financially since Biden took office. 4 in 10 say that's the case for them in a new ABC Washington Post poll. Another new poll from the Associated Press showing just 37% of Democrats want Biden to seek a second term. And for more on this, let's bring Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. Nathan, good to see you this evening. So what are you expecting tomorrow night in the State of the Union address?
Well, Jenna, first of all, I expect a speech that's probably going to be longer than necessary. I expect half of the room to be standing and applauding dozens of times in support of the president, and the other half of the room to barely be applauding at all. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a president who's going to tout what he's done, and I do think this will be a blueprint for a re-election effort if he indeed announces a run. I think he's going to talk about job creation and unemployment and paint a picture to the American people of why he should be rehired if he decides to go that route. I don't think that most normal people are going to watch the speech in its entirety, so it'll depend on what the media chooses to cover as well as what people see on social media. But I think we're going to hear these messages from the president moving forward and from other Democrats moving forward after the speech is over.
Yeah, we just heard from Secretary Buttigieg there. The administration seeming to think the president's list of accomplishments is too long to list. Nathan, your thoughts on why that's not moving the dial with the public?
Well, I think that it's about even if the president were to solve one problem or things get better in one area, there are other things that are still a challenge or things that are still in crisis. And so it really depends on what voters want to focus on. And we tend to have right now one party, the Republican Party, who's going to focus on the things that aren't going well. They're going to find something, and Democrats are going to choose that rosier picture. And once again, it'll probably come down to independence. And this is where, as long as the economy, there's uncertainty with the economy, or people don't feel great about the economy, where both President Biden and the Democratic Party are on very uncertain ground heading into 2024.
Yeah, speaking of the economy, let's put up that ABC News Washington Post poll again. 41% of Americans say they are worse off financially under President Biden. That's the most ever recorded, dating back 37 years in that poll. Nathan, is there any chance the president's speech tomorrow can change that perception?
I don't know if the speech itself will do that, but if the underlying numbers of the economy continue, I think voters will start to feel the economy getting better, and that will change their perception, but not the speech itself. One thing that I think was interesting, I dug into that poll a little bit, and it looked at Biden's overall job rating, and it said that he, right now in his term, he's about where Gerald Ford was, Jimmy Carter was, and Ronald Reagan was at this point in their terms, which is a whole myriad of options because Gerald Ford lost in the primary, Jimmy Carter lost in the general election, and Reagan went on to be reelected. So there are a lot of options about what could happen in 2024 based on what we're seeing right now.
Nathan Gonzalez bringing the historical context to us this evening. Nathan, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
And when we come back, the unlikely story of an unorthodox evangelist turned Oscar nominee. From atheist to evangelist to Oscar nominee, Charlie Mackesy is far from your typical artist. When the Academy Award nominations were announced this week, he was named one of the finalists for short animated films. Before that honor, Faith Nation anchor John Jessup traveled to London to hear firsthand what drives this unorthodox evangelist.
Charlie Mackesy has been described as a world-class artist, selling his artwork to the likes of Whoopi Goldberg and Sting.
When did you discover that you had artistic ability?
Good question. I mean, I think I probably knew that I could draw at school, but I think you need a reason to draw.
He found that reason about 25 years ago in a London park. An atheist at the time, he says he had a feeling that there must be more to this than meets the eye.
Jesus quietly introduced me to a journey into finding people really beautiful, which is how my art really began. Because I felt inside me he was going, look how beautiful is that guy sitting on that bench. And I would never have noticed him before.
In this bronze sculpture called The Return of the Prodigal Son, Mackesy captures the raw emotion of that familiar parable. It's located here at Holy Trinity Brompton, one of the most influential churches in the Church of England.
Didn't believe any of it at all.
Mackesy is a popular speaker here, particularly with unbelievers.
Charlie appeals to people outside of the church because he's not what they expect. And when you have a sort of picture of the evangelist, you don't picture Charlie Mackesy.
So I decided that what I'd do is, I was in bare feet anyway, so I stood on the loo seat like this,
he can be a bit unorthodox, like the day he describes hearing a gospel song for the first time at a music festival inside a portable toilet that was so filthy he stood on the seat to avoid the overflow. The song pierced through his atheism, moving him to tears.
And he's very humble, very unpretentious. He tells stories against himself.
I didn't really know what had happened to me, but as I was feeling it, my left foot slipped. And I went up to here.
While Mackessy's stories may not be for the faint of heart, he points out that those closest to Jesus, the disciples, could also be described as objectionable.
I realised that there were naughty people, unreligious people, people who didn't really have a religious etiquette, who probably wouldn't be that welcome in church.
I thought Christianity was be clean, come to church, be nice, don't use the F word, and you'll be accepted and liked, because